Okay, looks like we're ready to get started. Hello, everyone, and welcome to today's webinar with the Nature Conservancy in Arkansas. If we haven't met yet, my name is Jennifer Barnhouse. I'm the Director of Philanthropy for TNC's Arkansas chapter, and I'll be moderating our webinar today. Thank you for taking time out of your day to join us. As always, we are grateful for all of you, our supporters, partners, and many new friends who are interested in conservation and the Nature Conservancy's work in Arkansas. This work that you're going to hear about today is just simply not possible without your support. So in a moment, I'm going to introduce our topic and a little background and our presenters for the day. But first, some quick Zoom housekeeping. Our webinar is going to last about 40 minutes. Following our presenters, we'll leave about the last 8 to 10 minutes at the end for some questions and discussion. We are using the chat function today for questions. You can ask a question at any time by clicking on the chat button below. I'll just keep a log of them for the end. We recommend you set your view to speaker view, which can be found at the top right corner of your screen to better see our slides today. Everyone is being kept on mute to prevent outside noise from interfering. And we're recording this presentation and we'll send a follow-up link where you can access it any time or share it with others. And lastly, if we experience technical difficulties, just stick with us while we get it resolved. So today we wanted to give you a front row seat to our Bluffton Preserve and a peek behind the curtain on how we go about establishing a new preserve and opening it to the public. With spring on the way and many people looking forward to getting back outside, Bluffton is just an awesome place that we hope you're going to put on your list to visit. It's also a really great example of how the Conservancy uses our places to advance conservation strategies. So in this case, protecting a really important source of clean water for people and wildlife, creating resilient, thriving landscapes with prescribed fire, and most notably, inspiring and connecting more people with nature. So at TNC, we recognize that it is people who are really at the heart of our work. It's often their experiences with nature that lead them to take actions for conservation. And I imagine most of you on the phone can think back to certain memories or moments in your lives that sparked and nurtured your own love of nature and interest in conservation. I know for me, just one of those were annual camping trips over Thanksgiving at Huntsville State Park in Texas, where I grew up with a group of family and friends. So this is really why over the past 5 years, the Conservancy has strategically focused on opening up some of our preserves for the public to enjoy by adding a whole variety of amenities suitable for all ages, abilities, interests, and backgrounds. And over time, we want to broaden the groups of people that are taking action for nature through their giving, volunteerism, advocacy, or even as a career choice. So with that as some background, I'm just really pleased to introduce 2 colleagues who are really passionate about this work and also immensely talented at creating the spaces that allow it to happen. Mitchell Allen is our recreational use manager, which means he is responsible for designing and building the recreational amenities on our preserves around the state. Mitchell started on our team as a river restoration specialist and has previously worked for the National Park Service in Hot Springs, Arkansas, and the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service in Vernal, Utah. What makes Mitchell so good at his job is that he also just lives his work. His hobbies include mountain biking, rock climbing, kayaking, hiking, just about anything you can do outdoors that give him the ideal perspective on how to build a multi-use preserve. He also is a really skilled woodworker whose handiwork can be spotted at many of our places. So joining Mitchell is Leah Beck, who is our staff trail specialist. Like Mitchell, she is also an avid outdoors adventurer who lists hiking, canoeing, cross-country skiing, and backpacking among her hobbies, and can include trekking the entire Pacific Crest Trail on her resume. She has a master's degree in human dimensions of natural resources, or more simply stated, outdoor recreation, and her experience on trails has taken her from Utah to Maine to Alaska. If you have hiked on the Appalachian Trail, you have likely encountered some of her technical stonework. So we're just really fortunate to have her helping design and construct our trails here in Arkansas. And I know for me, having seen what goes into trail construction through Leah's eyes, I've never quite looked at them the same again. So with that, I am so pleased to turn the floor over to Mitchell and Leah.
Yeah, thanks, Jen. Leah and I are super excited to be here and super excited to share with y'all how we have, what we've been doing at Bluffton over the past couple of years. And really, Bluffton Preserve has been one of my favorite places ever since we acquired it years back. And, we think you're going to love it too whenever you get to go visit it. We're going to kind of go in three sections here. First, I'll talk a little bit about the background of Bluffton and why we even have it in the first place. And then the bulk of the presentation will be about, how we design and implement recreation. And then lastly, we'll kind of talk about how you can all experience it yourself. So we'll jump right in. Where is Bluffton? Well, it's in north central Arkansas in Van Buren County, just a few miles north of Clinton, Arkansas. And that's about a 90-minute drive north of Little Rock. You can see in the top right corner, there's a map that kind of shows some of the other cities. I think it's about 3 hours from Fayetteville and about the same from Jonesboro. What you're going to find there is a little less than 1,000 acres of just beautiful forest and really steep, rugged Ozark River Valley. And really, it's a recreation paradise. I mean, you can see from the pictures just the beautiful turquoise water, smallmouth, all kinds of fun stuff you can do and how you can interact with the preserve. Really, I think probably the two main reasons people come to Bluffton is one, the river. There's about 4 miles of the Archie Fork of the Little Red River that runs through the preserve. Again, beautiful turquoise water. There's massive boulders just kind of strung throughout the stream. And man, it's just awesome to see that river and see the fish in it and all that. And then secondly, the bluffs. When you're driving down into the valley along the road into the preserve, there's just bluff lines everywhere lining the valley. And I don't really know the history of why the place is called Bluffton. There's a cemetery called Bluffton Cemetery there, but I like to think it's just because of all the bluff lines. So this is a little time lapse I took one morning when we were out working from our Double Drop Falls trailhead, looking out over the preserve. And I just thought it was really cool. Every morning, pretty much, the fog just is down in the valley below you, and it just kind of rolls off down towards the Clinton and over the bluffs. And it's just really cool to be there and watch the sunrise at Bluffton. So yeah, why are we at Bluffton in the first place? Well, there's a couple special things about the upper Little Red River Watershed, which is where Bluffton is. And really, it's all about the river and protecting clean water for people and animals. And it's part of a much larger conservation effort that TNC has been working on for many years. First, you'll see on this map, there's 4 major forks of the Little Red River, and they all run into Greers Ferry Lake. And Greers Ferry Lake provides drinking water for a couple 100,000 Central Arkansans. Secondly, there's some really special species in those rivers. And so for both of those reasons, we really want clean water. And so on this map, you'll see our preserves are in green. So we have multiple preserves throughout the watershed. And then also, and you see Bluffton circled there in the red. Also, there's red stars that are kind of scattered about. And those are restoration projects that we've done. And we'll talk a little bit more about those. I'll describe them a little bit. But really, Bluffton's just part of this big project. It was a way for us to kind of have on the ground, work that people could see, that we could demonstrate what we were doing, and also just try to be a good community member and kind of show people what it's like to live along a river sustainably and in a conservation-minded way. So this picture on the left is a good kind of description of what's going on when the rivers are flooding and eroding and carrying sediment downstream. So that's what it looks like when the rivers are carrying all that dirt into the lake. And so you can imagine why that would be bad for drinking water and animals. And two of the main concerns with that are the top right picture, which is eroding stream banks. And so that happens a lot of times where people have cleared pasture all the way down to the river, or maybe they want to build their house right on the river. And so they take all the trees off and the water starts carrying all that bank away. The second one would be the gravel roads down below that. And so that picture is of a poorly maintained or maybe even poorly designed in the first place gravel road. And there's so many gravel roads in the upper Little Red watershed that, it contributes a lot of sediment. And so a lot of those red stars that you were seeing are projects that we've done on stream banks like that, or worked with the county or the city to fix those gravel roads and make them more sustainable. So yeah, I mentioned some special species. There's 23 species of greatest conservation need in the upper Little Red. And that just means that there's some really sensitive and special species that our partners like Game and Fish Commission, Arkansas Game and Fish, or the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service have kind of highlighted that we need to be careful about them so they don't become endangered. And there's also 2 federally listed endangered species in the river, and they're also endemic, which means that they're not found anywhere else in the entire world. That top right picture is the yellow-cheeked darter, which is one of the endangered species. And then that picture on the bottom is actually the Nature Conservancy and partners trying to net and catch those little yellow-cheeked darters to count and do a population estimate. So we mostly acquired Bluffton for river conservation, but we do a lot of other stuff there too. We've already replanted the entire floodplain to try to help with, when the river's flooding, try to retain some of that sediment and keep the banks from eroding. We've also reintroduced fire to the preserve. We had about 3 burns now, and it's really created some awesome open areas in the woods with, lots of new habitat for birds and a lot of biodiversity. It's really cool walking the sections of trail that go through the burned areas. In the summer, there's just flowers everywhere, and it's really pretty forest.
So you can see why the Nature Conservancy has Bluffton in the first place. It's a huge amount of conservation value packed into one little space, but TNC, and specifically TNC in Arkansas, has started to place value into showing off our conservation properties through a priority called Inspiring People for Nature, which all it does is it aims to get people from all backgrounds, all sorts of folks out interacting with nature in a positive way. So there's lots of ways someone can enjoy nature. I'm sure all of you have your favorite activities you do, but we decided to take a direct approach to this by implementing recreational use amenities, things like trails, trailheads, signs, kiosks, fishing piers, campsites, stuff that purposefully immerses people in the natural environment and gives them access to beautiful parts of Arkansas where there's active conservation projects going on.
Yeah, so early on when we started thinking about recreation at TNC, we thought as long as people were having a good experience on our places, that was really the most important thing. We thought maybe, that would lead to better support down the road. And so, but that doesn't always mean, support from the people that are already supporting us. Sometimes it means getting youth out there for really long-term support and getting a whole different age group and, people from different socioeconomic backgrounds out on our preserves. So that seems simple as we just give good people a good experience, right? But then you have to think about marrying that conservation, the real priorities on the place with recreation. So that's where it comes down to, a broad plan of what we're going to do and how we're going to tie those 2 together.
So the process we're going to describe is not just for Bluffton. It's 4 core concepts that we use when we design a new place in a TNC way for recreational use. Before trails are built, we take a huge step back and we look at the big picture during the planning phase. So during this time, we make a design and we inform all of our recreational amenity development based on engaging with important people like our neighbors, advocacy groups, user groups, people who are going to actually use the preserve and visit. We also talk with partners about possible projects. We give tours of the property and discuss all the sorts of things that could go on in terms of recreation. And then we also try to reach out to the community, involve local businesses. For Bluffton, there was a lot of specific stuff that we did right away.
Yeah, it's interesting. Bluffton had been used by, local people for a really long time as a swimming hole, as a place to go fishing, just a place to hang out. And so we didn't want to ruin any of that, really. We wanted to make sure we were working with all neighbors and all the stakeholders. So, we started talking to the local community. We'd already done some restoration work in Clinton, so we knew a few people in the city. And they suggested having a potluck down on the preserve, and they would bring a bunch of food. They said they like to do it that way. And so we brought some food also. We met on a Sunday afternoon and we just really sat down and talked for a couple hours and, made a list of things that the neighbors wouldn't like to see, things that they would like to see, and just kind of sussed it all out and got their feedback. And really that was good. We kind of ended that meeting with a decent plan of what we might want to see and do at Bluffton. And really we said we'd meet in a year after that and kind of follow up with all the things we said we'd do. And it ended up being a really good relationship. We met a lot of really good people through that. So like when we get done with our neighbor meetings and getting all that feedback from possible user groups, we start kind of giving the broad plan of what's going to happen, a very conceptual design. And so we go into the computer and use a GIS program like this one and start laying out where things are going to be. And like I said, it's pretty broad scale, like where the trailhead's going to go. For Bluffton specifically, where would the river access be? And then you know, how are we going to tie all those things together with trails? And you know, it's got to be intuitive. We want it to really make sense as people are driving into the preserves where they need to go or how to find things. Another thing we're thinking about is like Bluffton is a pretty wild and kind of rugged place. And we don't want to lose that feeling when we start designing our trails. So we really make a lot of effort to make sure stuff is kind of spread out and not so dense and crowded that you don't have that wild feeling anymore.
Right. And during this planning phase, it can be difficult for us to imagine all the types of recreation users because we have our own experiences. But it's important for us to think outside of those experiences, outside of our own sphere of knowledge, to make sure we're not cornering ourselves, and to use the knowledge and information that we gathered earlier with the partner meetings, with our meetings with neighbors, and to apply that in our process as we keep going. So now that we have a plan of attack and we have this nice map that Mitchell's made in GIS, we move on into the field for something called ground truthing, which is where the real glamour of trail planning begins. So basically during ground truthing, we are out walking the entire preserve using the map that Mitchell made as a guide for us. So when we're out there walking, we have the basic flow and we have the mileage goals that we kind of want to get out there. But now we're up close and personal with what's actually there, with the rocks that are in front of us, the steepness, the gradient, and stuff like that. So the first thing we're going to look at is sustainable slopes. We're trying not to exceed anything that is going to be unsustainable long term, and to make it so it's easy walking, but we can still get to some of those higher elevation places. Additionally, we're not trying to take out every single tree and make a huge construction site. Bluffton is really rugged, like we said. So instead, we're trying to assess the most intuitive way through the woods to make it feel natural for people to walk, and to only take out trees that make sense. A lot of times that's just cedar trees, which are an invasive.
Yeah, and from our conceptual map, we kind of have these anchor points, and that's places that we really have to get to, or places that we know that we only have a small area to get through, like a bluff line or something like that, you know, a trailhead that we have to make it to. And so as we're thinking about all these other things like slope and trying to incorporate as many of the natural features as possible, we still know we have to get to certain places. And sometimes that's really easy, and sometimes that's pretty tough.
So on the left here, you can see this map. So this is on an app we use on our phone called Avenza. You can see the little trail lines, hopefully through the computer, and then these little red dots. The little red dots are those anchor points, those points of interest. I'm assuming on this day, these were drainages, stuff that we could easily get to. And sometimes it goes smoothly, like Mitchell said, and we walk, we find these points, and it's easy. We know we have to put the trail there, but sometimes it does not go so smoothly. You can see now on the left-hand side, we have this really dense network of all the places we walked. I think this was a 3-day adventure of us just backtracking, going over the same plot of land over and over again, trying to find a way through that made sense. I fell so much, so did Mitchell. We fell a lot on the steepness, but we were really discouraged at the end of it. But there's a lot of good things that came out of those walking sessions.
Yeah, so we had this conceptual map, and we really thought we were going to be able to make it work, but we got kind of cliffed off so many times, and it wasn't really safe to try to build a trail through there. Didn't know if it'd be safe to even use after if it was built. And so we had to take a step back and started looking at some of the other places in the preserve that we hadn't spent as much time, and went and walked a bunch of those places. And what we ended up finding is this bluff you see Leah standing on the right. And it really was one of the prettiest views on the preserve. When we got there, it gave us one of those feelings that we're just like, oh man, we've got to get people here. We've got to figure out how to get people here and give them the same feeling we're having. So although it's really discouraging, that's actually a pretty common thing that happens when you start ground truthing, is you have to be adaptable and figure out where things can work in a different way. And honestly, the trail turned out so much better because we had to move it to the other side of the preserve.
So now that we've gone through that arduous little process, we've moved past all the planning and preparation, and we're going to go into building the actual trails. So when we build the actual trails, we've gone from a huge bird's eye view, and now we're zoomed in all the way up to the point where we're staring at individual rocks and soil that are eventually going to end up being our trail. So one of the main goals that we have is to try and mimic the essence of the preserve, which is kind of some flowery language, but what it means is to just use the natural materials that are there and make sure that they really shine. So we're just taking things like rocks and cedars. I have that technical background in stonework, and Bluffton was really a paradise for all the rock that we found there. Mitchell has great carpentry skills, so we were able to use trees to go over some drainages. And although Bluffton is rugged, I know we've said that a lot, it's rugged, it's steep. As we discovered during ground truthing, and as you can see in this little picture on the left-hand side, we were able still to make a path through it that has sustainable slopes. It sheds water. It gets people out into the wild ruggedness where they can access it. And it keeps our conservation goals in mind as we're going through things so that we can use the natural environment in an immersive way.
Yeah, really, as Leah is saying, the most important thing to us is designing a trail that really feels like it fits into the landscape and not just stuck on top of the landscape, not just built whatever we think should go there. And, it's really fun as we're going through doing this design and building to, when we see cool trees that are all twisted up and gnarly, or a really awesome rock, to kind of work with those things and incorporate them into the trail. And then later on, a lot of times after the trails are open, we'll see pictures posted on social media with kids climbing on those rocks or posing next to the tree. And it's pretty fulfilling to see those things and see that people are having the experience that they hoped they would when we were building it.
So who is actually out there building stuff? So a lot of times it's Mitchell and I. Other times we have volunteers out with us, which you can see in this little time-lapse video. We're cruising along the Prickly Pear Trail here, which is an entirely hand-built section. Bluffton and all of our preserves that we do recreation on is a huge collaborative process. As we said from the beginning, we're involving the community, and we continue that all the way through in those types of collaborations. So sometimes it's as easy as just scraping off the top layer of soil, as you just saw, and other times it's like a little more of a construction project.
Yeah, so this is one of those really collaborative efforts that took a little more than just scraping the top of the surface. So we had one of those pinch points I was telling you about earlier, where we came to a bluff line, and it's about a 25-foot bluff line for most of it, but we found a spot where it was about 8 foot tall that we could get through. And so we decided to use some of the eastern red cedar, which is invasive, that we remove a lot of anyways, but it's also a really good wood to build with. And so we dropped some logs and decided we could build a bridge to get people from the top to the bottom of the bluff. And so here you see us, we'd cut some logs and we're zip lining them all the way over to the spot where they need to be. And then after that, our contractor, Affordable Trail Solutions, had his machine on top. And we had some slings and pulleys and cables, all sorts of different rigging tools to kind of move these logs around and get them right where they need to be for the bridge. And after that, we had volunteers help us deck the whole thing with Eastern Red Cedar. And then finally, we were able to add a railing to it, and, it turned out really nice. And what's funny is, people use this preserve all the time anyways, and people had been hearing about it, and they were hiking while we were building this. So you should have seen the looks of people when we just had logs laid on there. And then when we decked it, they were like, well, that's better, but that's still really steep and slick. And then we added rails, and people were just loved it. They were so excited that they could actually get up and down it and feel safe and all that. So it's pretty funny. Volunteers are really just another part of how we're trying to build experiences for people. And, we try to keep it less about the work and more about the experience. So, we always have food after we have volunteer days. That bottom left picture is a crawfish bowl that one of the volunteers suggested one time. And then the bottom right, we went on a hike after our work day, and that's a bunch of the volunteers that stuck around. So it's all about that experience and creating fun things to do with our volunteers. And a lot of times these kind of parts of the event is when we really get to know people and find volunteers that stick with us for a really long time and do a lot of work.
So we have our amazing contractors who are out there building huge portions of trail. We also have these volunteers. We have groups. We also get individuals out, because this experience out there can be super gratifying. You can build a bridge and literally walk over it at the end of the day. So that's an awesome experience for us and for the people that are out there with us to say, hey, I helped build this trail, which can also help lend a hand later as we get into our management side. Volunteers will pop in again. But the last step in this building process is to manage what we have, to maintain and improve all the existing infrastructure and trails that we put in. So we'll highlight the volunteers once again that came back into this process as they've been through the entire way. In 2019, we were super lucky to have over 1,000 volunteer hours specific to recreational use, kind of incredible. We had some big days, 80 plus people. And as you can guess, 2020 was a little different for us. We did have some individuals out that really helped us out. It's continued to be very important to us. But beyond volunteers, management takes actually a lot of planning.
Yeah, so we, spent all this time building and adding recreational amenities to the preserve, and that seems really tough. But actually, that's the easy part. The harder part is making sure that we can maintain all those, for the long term, and making sure the experience stays good for people too. And so, really, it's about a couple of things. One is having a really good recreational use plan that we kind of outline and schedule those things that we're going to do. And also it's getting feedback from the public. And that's probably the hardest part for me, is because it's, especially like on social media, you really hear the worst things more than you hear like the best things about a place that's going on. And it's hard from when you're trying to create this experience to hear people, giving you feedback that might not be positive feedback.
Right. I agree totally. Having these long-term plans, like Mitchell said, we don't want to create something that's just diminishing and eroding or out of style in 5 years. We want it to be timeless, right? Something that can lead to those good experiences, and not people getting hit in the face with branches or walking through muddy trail that's not draining. Because like we've said a million times throughout this, it is all about the experience, and it will continue to be. So when we try to assess our recreational use amenities that we're going to implement, we go about it like you look at someone deciding if they had a good day or not. So it's not just, oh, I had a good day. It's a bunch of different small assessments, right, that make up one big answer. And so when we're building these things, we think about all the experiential factors that go into it. It's not just when they're hiking out there. It's when folks are clicking on the map on our website and making a plan, when they're driving there, as long as they're not getting lost out there, things like that, right? All the way up till they're reflecting on their experience. It's a huge process, a great opportunity for us to reach out to people and to have them out on our properties.
Yeah, so basically we just covered like a year of our life in like 20 minutes. But that's the behind the scenes of what it's like to design and build a place like Bluffton and add recreation to it. So next, what's out there, and what do we end up with at Bluffton? Well, we have about 7 miles of multi-use trail, and there's 4 purpose-built overlooks. Really, though, there's countless overlooks across the whole preserve. All those bluff lines we were talking about, you can walk along the top of them and see forever all over the place. We also have 3 trailheads along the road as you drive in, and they don't have trailhead signs yet or kiosks, but they will probably by the end of spring, early summer. And I know this map is pretty small and hard to see, but you can find a better version on our website, nature.org/Arkansas. And it's also got instructions of how to put this map on your phone and use it to tell you where you are on the preserve while you're out there. So you can go there to find a better, bigger version of it.
So what we mean by multi-use trail is that it's going to be good for anyone to get out there and use, whether they're hiking or mountain biking, walking, running, all of those types of things. The trails are going to feel like a regular hiking trail, but they're also going to have some features that are specific to mountain bikers. There's also, trails range in difficulty from super easy through the field portions, and then maybe a little steeper up on the higher elevation spots. So what else is there? Well, we have a little day use area that's down here by the river. This includes some picnic tables, there's river access and swimming holes. You could also get on the trails from that section. Here is a recent picture of the day use area with the picnic table. You can see some ice on the bluffs back there. So I guess if you jumped in, it might be a little cold right now, but swimming season is coming soon. So last thing we're going to talk about at what's there is we decided to put in some campsites to continue that really immersive feeling of being at Bluffton. There's 2 different options. You can go to a drive-up site, which is classic car camping, pull up your car at a picnic table, set up a tent, and you have access to the river there. And then the other thing we did is put in backcountry sites, which are like 3/4 mile-ish from a trailhead. And they look something like this. So they're going to have a flat area for your tent, a little fireplace there too, little fire ring. It feels like that ruggedness of Bluffton. And at the Prickly Pear site, we do have really nice views of the entire preserve.
Yeah, so if you do make it out to Bluffton, we were going to give you some things to look for, and some of them are pretty easy to find and easily accessible, and some of them are pretty hard. Obviously, the Archie Fork, pretty easy to find, and this particular spot is right by the campsites, the car camping spots. And it's cool because these boulders have fallen off the bluff line right above you, and they're massive. They're landed right in the middle of the stream. And as you can see, they're actually big enough that trees are growing on top of them. It's a really cool spot to see. The Emerald Pool Overlook, also really easy to access. There's signs all the way to it. It's on the map. It was one of the first places that really inspired me for building trail at Bluffton. It's a bluff line sitting about 60 foot right above, just a beautiful swimming hole in the river with big boulders in it. And like it's called the Emerald Pool Overlook, it's got awesome turquoise water.
So this one's not hard to find, this viewpoint, but you might have to look a little more closely to find the little hog face rock. You can see this little snout in the mouth. You have to like sit and look at it at a certain angle, but it's super cool when you find it. Also, we talked about that prickly pear viewpoint. We put a little rock bench in, just this huge flat rock that we found there. Just spectacular views of the river from a higher viewpoint. And then lastly, the infamous trail couch. So our contractors found a bunch of rock in this area off the trail and put a little couch in. It's pretty cool. I took a nap there the other day. It was lovely.
Yeah, so Leah and I feel super lucky and blessed to be able to do this as our job, and really sharing it with everybody here that's really what it's all about for us. We talk a lot about what we did on the place, but really this is a hugely collaborative effort. We have tons of volunteers. We have, contractors like Affordable Trail Solutions that helped with this one. And also it takes partners to acquire the land and partners to fund the actual trails. So this one, we had money from the Arkansas Department of Transportation and a really generous grant from Northwest Arkansas Trailblazers. So it takes a lot of different work to make these things happen. And, it can be a tough job trying to marry conservation and recreation and do it a way where we don't get away from the real priority, which is conservation. But we really think the payoff is immense.
It really is. TNC protects and conserves a lot of areas in Arkansas, especially. And this small percentage of land can reach some high rewards if we can expose it to a lot of people. And Bluffton is just pure magic. It really is. It's a beautiful place. So we're excited we got to chat with you guys about it. And with that, I think we'll just send it back to Jen for some questions.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Mitchell and Leah, for all of that. Just a really great overview and presentation. And I have to believe that everybody who joined us today hopefully learned something new about a place they can see or how it came into being. So we have had several both comments and questions come through. So I'll just start with a few of those. Holly Sanders says, first of all, a comment, volunteers are heroes. Just a lot of great kudos for all the awesome volunteer work that you highlighted today, and has asked about the fishing. Is there good fishing out there?
Oh, I've been told I'm not supposed to tell people how good the fishing is out there. So if that tells you anything, I showed a picture of a really pretty smallmouth, so we'll just leave it at that.
So I think the answer's yes. Good hidden fishing spots. Also, Marilyn Santa would like to know if the trails are dog friendly.
The trails are dog friendly. Yeah, we allow dogs on our property, and dogs, I've seen them out there all the time and they really enjoy it too.
Yeah. I have to say, I have two that go hiking with us everywhere. And of course, we keep them on a leash, but yeah, great trails for dogs. And also if they like to swim, good places for some swimming. Our good friend, Steve Strauss, has asked, what is the risk of encountering snakes?
There's always a risk. I don't know how many we encountered while we were building, but, not that many. I think we've seen, we had a rattlesnake one day on the trail and then maybe a copperhead, but not that many. There's always a risk. I mean, it's Arkansas. There's a lot of snakes in the state, but we didn't encounter too many while we were there building.
Yeah. I have to say, Bluffton is just, Arkansas has so many beautiful places. Bluffton has to be one of my favorites. And all the times I've been out there, probably half of those I've encountered some kind of snake, but so far they haven't been poisonous like I came across one of the most beautiful bright green, like little garter snakes out there at one point. So, but yeah, something to kind of be aware of and prepared for. So also a comment from, let's see, Larry Fliss, who looks like is with a master naturalist group that may have come out and volunteered at one point and just said, you know, no question, but just kudos for the work well done. The place has really developed since I've been out there and looking forward to seeing it again.
We loved having the master naturalists out there. They actually helped build that last campsite, the Prickly Pear campsite.
Awesome. A couple of questions about floating options. Floating the river. Can you do it? How do you do it?
Yeah, so like we said, there's a river access on the property. It's about a 9-mile float down to the city of Clinton. And, you know, it's a fairly rugged stream. It's a little more rowdy than, say, like Ponca de Kyles on the Buffalo River, if you're familiar with that section. You know, it has a pretty wild feel. It is very, very pretty. And I highly suggest, if you have the time to go do it. There's also an outfitter in Clinton. He's actually in Shirley, I think, called Little Red River Outfitters. And he will get you fixed up with a canoe, a shuttle, or just information of, you know, water levels and stuff like that, because it doesn't run quite as long as what like the Lower Buffalo or something would run, because it's a smaller watershed.
Yep, and it's just good to know coming up on floating season. Let's see, we had a question about so this came in before you had sort of talked about maybe the map and what to go see out there, but what kind of recreation can you expect? So maybe you can just sum up, you know, quickly all the different types of ways you can recreate at Bluffton.
Sure. So as we've said, you can definitely hike the entire preserve, all those 7 miles. You can hang out just for a picnic at the day use area. You can fish. You can mountain bike. You can trail run. You can camp. All sorts of things, actually. And it's really great to have 2 types of recreation day, right? So you go out, you can mountain bike one section, you can hike another, hike in and camp, fish and go on a walk. It's great.
There's some pretty wild places to explore in Bluffton too that we didn't touch with any trails or anything. So yeah, you can go get lost if you really want to.
Yeah, that's awesome. Laura Hendricks says, this is one of my favorite swimming holes. Yes, it has a beautiful place to go swimming. Will rock climbing be allowed at Bluffton?
Yeah, actually, this bluff line that you see in the picture that's still up on the screen, there's been quite a few routes climbed on it. There's no hardware or anything, but the rocks are definitely climbable in a few places.
We have a couple of questions about, you know, volunteering. So is there a volunteer day planned soon, or how can somebody learn more about, you know, plugging into future volunteer opportunities?
Sure, and we can send out the Arkansas volunteer email for us as well. But if you're interested in bringing a group out, we do tons of group trail days. For COVID, obviously, there's some protocols we have to follow for that. But I also go out with just individual volunteers. We do smaller projects, or we tackle something bigger that I just need another person for. But it's a really good way to get out and know some more of those technical things that we've talked about, like building staircases or building bridges. So yeah, our website, I think, is also a good way to access that information, or social media.
Okay, great. So just a little bit about, you know, how we manage all of our places. So are all of our preserves open to the public or managed for recreational use in some way? Do they all have a recreational use plan, or is this just for certain areas?
Yeah, so, you know, our places have always generally been open to the public, but I think the real issue was if you could find them, they were open to the public. A lot of them are very far out and there's nothing on them. And so the answer is no, we don't have recreation on all of them. It really kind of takes a very specific situation for that to work, you know, whether it's location, you know, the donor's wishes, or whoever helped fund it, what they are hoping to do with it. Even like we said, with talking to the neighbors, sometimes the neighbors are, you know, vehemently against us. And, you know, really the priority is always conservation. It's always going to be conservation. We want to share these places because we think it's really important to give people good experiences, but that doesn't make it work for everywhere. Some places are just either too sensitive or it just doesn't work for other reasons. So no, there's only about 5-6 preserves right now that really have like intentional recreation added. Other places, you know, you can maybe visit and there might be kind of social trails or something that are going through them from people visiting, but only really like amenities like this only at a few preserves.
Yeah, less than 10% of our properties for sure.
Yeah. Well, lots of really great and thoughtful questions. You know, we're about 12:40, so we've really come to the end of our time together today. So we're going to wrap it up. But just thanks again to you, Mitchell and Leah, for the great information. There are lots of just comments about what an interesting, well done presentation this was. People are really looking forward to get out and seeing it, which is really what we wanted. If we did not get to your question today, or you have a question pop up later, you know, feel free to follow up with us when we send out an email, and we'll be sure to get back to you. We will send out an email either later today or tomorrow that also has a recording a link to the recording of this webinar, and just some additional information like directions to Bluffton and the app that you might use to navigate it. You know, and then as spring approaches and we're just thinking about how to get out, you know, feel free to respond with other, you know, webinar subjects that you would like to hear about. Would you like to learn about other places or just other areas of our work? We're always interested in you and really what you would like us to be sharing with you. And lastly, you know, behind all of this work are just many members and donors whose gifts make it happen. Truly, you know, we're a nonprofit, can't do it without you. So there are a lot of ways that you can give to support the Nature Conservancy. If you'd like to learn more about those, you are welcome to contact me anytime. And if you'd like to become a member or even make a gift to support this work, you can do so online at our website, which is nature.org/Arkansas. So with that, I'm going to close this out for today, but just thank you again and look forward to seeing you next time.
Thank you.
Thank you.